Diane Fontaine did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. She stood in the middle of her living room on a Sunday afternoon while 12 family members sat around her and listened. When she spoke about her daughter, she sounded like she was reading a report, not talking about her own child. The access log shows Zaria's credentials were used to pull those files at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. The files were transferred to a competitor. Lumiere investigated and terminated her contract. That is what happened. She folded her hands and waited like the matter was already settled. Zaria sat across from her with her back straight and both feet on the floor. She had been in the house for 40 minutes and no one had offered her water. That is not what happened, Zaria said. I was 3 days from closing that contract. Why would I steal files from a deal I built myself and give them to a company I've never even spoken to? Nobody answered. She continued. Yes, my credentials were used. That doesn't mean I used them. I was home that night. My phone data, my laptop activity, and my building entry log all show I never left my apartment. I asked Lumiere to check all of that. They didn't. Of her ants shifted in her chair. Someone else looked up at the ceiling like this conversation had nothing to do with them. Delancey sat near the window with her hands folded in her lap. Her face looked sad, like watching all this was painful for her. Zaria looked at her for a second, then looked away. I worked at Lumiere for 6 years, Zaria said. I built the Hawthorne account from a cold call. I wrote every pitch, ran every meeting, handled every client relationship. 8 months of work. Then 3 days before the contract gets signed, someone uses my login and suddenly I'm the one sitting here explaining myself while no real investigation was done. She looked around the room. 12 people, people she had helped before. People she had lent money to, picked up from the hospital, shown up for when they needed help. Not one person spoke for her. Deanne waited until the room was completely quiet. Then she said, "All you've ever done is disgrace this family." She said it calmly, like she was commenting on the weather. "You are disgusting." Didn't react immediately. She sat there for about 3 seconds. Then she picked up her bag from the floor, stood up, and walked out. She passed her aunts, past Delancey, walked down the hallway and opened the front door. She did not slam it. The door closed quietly behind her. Inside the house, nobody moved. If you just watched that and felt something, relax, sit back, because this story is only getting started. And if you're new here, like this video, subscribe and drop in the comments what time you came across this. I want to know. Episode 2. Zaria Fontaine did not grow up expecting warmth from that house. She learned early how things worked. Her mother believed love meant discipline, good behavior, and keeping up appearances. You were expected to behave properly when guests came. You were not supposed to complain. You were not supposed to cause problems. Zaria caused problems because she asked questions. If something didn't make sense, she said so. If something was unfair, she argued. If she didn't agree, she said no. Her mother called it attitude. Her aunts called it being difficult. Zaria just thought she was being honest, but honesty was not something that house liked very much. They cared more about how things looked from the outside. By the time she was 15, Zaria stopped trying to fit in. She decided she would build her own life and stop waiting for her family to understand her. By 30, she had done exactly that. She was a creative director at Lumiere PR, a boutique firm in Atlanta. She got there by working harder than most people around her. She was direct, organized, and very good at pitching clients. People didn't always find her easy to work with, but they respected her because she delivered results. Then the Hawthorne Industries account came in. Hawthorne was a large real estate company in Atlanta, and they didn't have a PR firm yet. If Lumiere landed that account, it would be a big deal for the company and for Zaria's position there. She started with a cold email. No referral, no connection. Just a well-written email and a strong idea. They replied 4 days later. She had a meeting by Friday. That was the start of 8 months of work. She wrote every pitch herself. She attended every meeting. She handled every client dinner and every strategy change. She didn't hand the account to anyone else because she had built the relationship herself and she wanted to finish what she started. 3 days before the contract was supposed to be signed, the files disappeared. Confidential Hawthorne documents were taken from Lumiere's server. Strategy documents, competitor research, campaign plans, months of work. The access log showed one name, Zaria, her login, her credentials. 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night when she was actually at home with her laptop closed. The next morning, Lumiere called her in for a meeting. She explained everything. The timeline didn't match. She had no connection to the competitor company the files were sent to. She had no reason to destroy a deal she had spent 8 months working on. They suspended her that afternoon. They fired her 2 days later. She asked for a proper investigation 3 times. Each time they told her the evidence was clear and the decision was final. What nobody really looked at was Delancey. Delancey Fontaine-Broussard had come to live with Diane when she was 11 after her parents died. She was quiet and polite and very good at behaving the way people expected her to behave. Diane liked her immediately. Zaria never felt jealous of Delancey. She had accepted a long time ago that Delancey fit into that family better than she did. What she didn't realize was that Delancey had been planning something for months. 6 weeks before the files were stolen, Delancey came to dinner at Zaria's apartment. At the end of the night, she offered to bring Zaria's work bag from the hallway. She was gone for less than 2 minutes. During that time, she took a photo of a sticky note inside the bag that had Zaria's login details written on it. Earlier that evening, she had also borrowed Zaria's keys to move her car. She had the keys long enough to copy the office access card that was attached to the keyring. That was all she needed. The shell company that received the stolen files had been created months earlier. It existed just long enough to receive the files and create a trail that led back to Zaria. By the time anyone could have looked deeper, Delancey had already erased everything that connected her to it. Then she sat in Diane's living room that Sunday afternoon with her hands folded and a sad look on her face while everyone talked about how disappointed they were in Zaria. And nobody in that room asked her a single question. Zaria walked out of that house with no job, no family, and no one who believed her. But 3 days later, something happened in a parking lot that was going to change everything. And it started with a 5-year-old in frog boots. Episode 3, It Rained Hard That Thursday. Zaria drove around for almost 40 minutes without any plan. She just didn't want to sit in her apartment anymore. The place was too quiet, and every time she picked up her phone, she remembered there was no one she could call who would actually help. She eventually pulled into a strip mall parking lot. There was a pharmacy, a nail salon, and a check cashing place. She turned off the engine and sat there watching the rain hit the windshield for a while. Then she got out of the car. She didn't have an umbrella and didn't try to find one. She walked to the bench outside the pharmacy and sat down in the rain like she didn't care that she was getting wet. 4 days. 4 days since the family meeting. 4 days since she left her mother's house while 12 people sat there and said nothing for her. 4 days of waking up with no job and a reputation she didn't deserve. She had kept herself together through everything. The suspension, the termination call, the meeting with her family, the drive back home. She stayed calm because someone was always watching, or she had to explain herself, or she had to think clearly. But now nobody was watching, so she cried. She didn't cry loudly. She just sat on the wet bench with her face in her hands and let the tears fall. Her shoulders didn't shake. She just sat there quietly while the rain fell, and everything she had been holding in for 4 days finally came out. She didn't notice when someone walked up to her. Something lightly bumped her arm. She lifted her head. A little girl was standing beside the bench holding a yellow umbrella. She looked about 5 years old. She was wearing frog rain boots and a lavender coat with the hood down. Her hair was in 2 puffs. She had carefully positioned the umbrella so it covered both of them. Zaria looked at her. The girl looked back at her like this was completely normal. "Pretty girls don't cry," the girl said. She sounded very serious. "Daddy told me you're pretty, so you should stop." Stared at her for a moment, then suddenly laughed. A real laugh, the first one in 4 days. "Where did your daddy teach you that?" Zaria asked. "When I was crying one time and I didn't want to stop," the girl said. She adjusted the umbrella a little. "He said it and it worked. It's working now too. You stopped." Realized she had stopped crying. "What's your name?" Zaria asked. "Ariam," the girl said. "What's yours, Zaria?" Ariam nodded slowly. "I like that name." Then she sat down on the bench next to Zaria without asking and kept holding the umbrella over both of them. "Are you okay?" Zaria looked at her. The girl was looking straight at her, waiting for a real answer. "I will be," Zaria said. She wasn't completely sure, but saying it out loud made it feel a little more possible. Ariam nodded like that was a good enough answer. They sat quietly for a moment while the rain continued. "Why are you out here by yourself?" Zarya asked. "Not by myself. My daddy is inside buying my medicine. I didn't want to wait inside because it smells funny." She looked at Zarya. "Why are you out here by yourself?" "I needed some air," Zarya said. Ariam looked at the rain falling right in front of them, then looked back at Zarya. She didn't say anything, but her face clearly said that explanation didn't make sense. "I had a hard week," Zarya said. "Oh," Ariam said. "My daddy has hard weeks too. He doesn't cry though, because pretty girls do cry." "No, because he's not a girl," she said very seriously. "He just gets quiet. I don't like it when he gets quiet." Watched her sitting there, holding the umbrella carefully so it covered both of them. "Does he know where you are right now?" Zarya asked. Ariam looked toward the pharmacy door. "He's about to find out." Episode 4. The pharmacy door opened. A man stepped outside and stopped when he didn't see his daughter where he expected her to be. He looked around the parking lot, trying to stay calm but clearly searching. Then he saw Ariam sitting on the bench next to Zarya. He walked toward them quickly but didn't run. "Ariam." His voice was calm but firm. Ariam looked up at him like everything was normal. "Daddy, this is Zarya. She was sitting in the rain, so I helped her." Looked at Zarya carefully. Not angry, just trying to understand the situation. Zarya looked back at him and didn't say anything. "She was crying," Ariam added, "but she stopped." Was a short silence. "Thank you," he said to Zarya, "for sitting with her." "She sat with me," Zarya said. "I was already here." Looked at her for a moment, then nodded once and looked back at his daughter. "We need to go." "Zarya had a hard week," Ariam said. "She didn't move." "Ariam." "She said she will be okay, but I want to make sure." Pressed her lips together so she wouldn't laugh. This 5-year-old was very serious. "I'm okay," Zarya said to Ariam. "I promise." Looked at her face carefully like she was checking if that was true. Then she stood up and held the umbrella out to Zarya. "Keep it," she said. "You don't have one. I can't take your umbrella." "I have more at home," Ariam said, still holding it out until Zarya took it. Then she looked at her father. "Ready." He had watched the whole conversation quietly. He looked at Zarya one more time and said, "I'm sorry if she bothered you." "She didn't," Zarya said. "And she meant it," he nodded. Then he put his hand on Ariam's shoulder and they walked toward a dark car parked at the end of the lot. Ariam turned around once and waved. Zarya lifted the yellow umbrella a little and waved back. She stayed on the bench for a few more minutes after they drove away. The rain was getting lighter. She didn't feel completely okay, but she didn't feel as alone as she did when she first came there. She still didn't know the man's name. Ariam hadn't said it. His name was Cog1, and Zarya would find that out 11 days later when he called her. During those 11 days, Ariam talked about Zarya several times. G1 knew this because his staff mentioned it, his driver mentioned it, and Ariam herself brought Zarya up at dinner more than once. "Zarya does PR," Ariam said one evening while eating. G1 looked at her. "How do you know what she does?" "She told me," Ariam said. "She had a hard week. I think she needs work." Put his chopsticks down. "You talked about her job." "I asked questions," Ariam said. "You always say asking questions is how you learn." He had said that so he couldn't argue with her. His company had opened a North American headquarters in Atlanta a few months earlier. They still needed a PR firm for the public launch. His assistant had already prepared a list of PR firms, but he hadn't looked at it yet. After Ariam mentioned Zarya again a few days later, he finally read the list. The next morning, he called Zarya. She didn't answer, so he didn't leave a message. She called back about 20 minutes later. Her voice sounded professional but cautious, like she didn't know who was calling or what the call was about. He told her who he was and that he was looking for a PR firm for a corporate launch. He said he had reviewed her background and wanted to meet. He did not mention his daughter. She agreed to the meeting. He could tell from her voice that she needed the work but was trying not to sound desperate. He respected that. 3 days later, he walked into the conference room and saw her sitting across the table. She was calm, prepared, and had clearly built a full presentation specifically for his company. He immediately understood why his daughter had remembered her. Ariam had asked if she could come to the meeting. He had said no. She accepted that answer very calmly, which worried him a little. What happened in that conference room was going to surprise both of them. But what Ariam was already planning, at 5 years old, neither of them saw coming at all. Episode 5. Zarya had been sitting at her kitchen table for 6 days straight. She wasn't doing nothing. She was working, updating her portfolio, emailing contacts, trying to rebuild her professional network. She made lists, sent emails, and followed up once. She refused to beg anyone for work, but the calls were not coming the way she needed them to. She was 30 years old with 6 years of solid experience, but now her record said she had been terminated for corporate espionage. That label spread fast. People who had praised her work months ago were suddenly very busy. They were polite, but they were not available. She was looking at her laptop on a Tuesday morning when her phone rang with a number she didn't know. She almost ignored it. She answered on the 4th ring. "This is Zarya, COG1, the man said. Then after a short pause, we met briefly. My daughter introduced us. She immediately remembered the parking lot, the pharmacy, the little girl with the umbrella. "I remember," she said. "Looking for a PR firm to manage the public launch of CO Meridian's North American operations. I've reviewed your background. I'd like to meet." She paused for 1 second, not because she didn't want the job, but because she wanted to answer calmly. "I can do that," she said. "When works for you?" She spent 2 days preparing for that meeting. She researched CO Meridian thoroughly. Their position in the Korean market, their expansion into North America, how they were currently presenting themselves, and what they would need specifically in Atlanta. She built a full presentation focused only on them, not a general pitch. Everything was specific to their company and their situation. She walked into the conference room on Thursday morning, and he was already there, sitting and looking at something on his phone. He looked up when she walked in and gestured to the chair across from him. She sat down and opened her laptop. Then the door opened again, and Ariam walked in wearing a pink dress and her frog boots. She looked around the room like she belonged there and climbed into the chair next to her father. Zarya looked at her. Ariam looked back. "Hi, Zarya." "Hi, Ariam." Ji-won looked at his daughter in a way that made it clear this had not been planned. Ariam folded her hands on the table and looked at Zarya's laptop screen like she was part of the meeting. Zarya decided to continue. She presented everything. The positioning strategy, the launch plan, the media approach, and the community engagement strategy she believed would work better than just advertising. She spoke directly and didn't pretend everything they were doing was perfect. When she saw gaps, she said so. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked 4 questions. They were specific and showed he had been listening carefully. She answered all 4 directly. He did not smile during the meeting. She thought he was used to being in charge. Not in an obvious way. He just spoke and moved like someone who expected people to listen. When she disagreed with him about the media timeline and told him clearly that his plan would make them miss the first news cycle, he looked at her for a moment differently than before. Not angry, just surprised that she pushed back. At the end of the meeting, he thanked her for coming and said he would be in touch. She packed her laptop, said goodbye to Ariam, and left without asking if she had done well. He called her the next morning. "You have the contract." That was all he said at first. "Thank you," she replied. "Your portfolio was stronger than the other firms I interviewed. That is why you have it," he said. Then he paused. "I want to be clear about that." She understood what he meant. He didn't want her to think this was because of Ariam. "I didn't assume otherwise," she said. "Good," he said. He told her his assistant would send the paperwork and that he expected the first strategy document within 10 days. "You'll have it in 7, she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Fine." Then they hung up. Zarya leaned back in her chair and finally let out a long breath. She didn't celebrate. She knew this was just the beginning of a lot of work. But for the first time since she was fired, she felt like things might still work out. That evening, Ariam apparently announced at dinner that Zarya had gotten the job. Ji-won told her Zarya got the job because she was the most qualified. Ariam nodded like she already knew that. They were about to spend a lot of time working together, and they were going to disagree about many things. Neither of them knew yet what working together was going to lead to. Episode 6, the CO Meridian pre-launch industry event was held at a hotel in Midtown on a Thursday evening. It wasn't a huge event, maybe 60 or 70 people. Developers, investors, real estate contacts, and a few city officials. The kind of event where people talk, exchange numbers, and remember who they met. Zarya had planned the entire event. The format, the guest list, the schedule, everything. 3 weeks earlier, she told G1 that their first impression in Atlanta should feel like a conversation, not a formal presentation. He asked her to explain why in writing. She sent him a document explaining it, and he approved it the same day. She was standing near the side of the room talking to a city planning contact she had invited when she saw Marcus Webb across the room. She recognized him immediately. Marcus had been a senior account manager at Lumiere. He had seen her the day she was suspended. He had walked past her in the hallway and said nothing. After she was fired, she had sent him one professional message. He never replied. Now he was standing with two members of G1's operations team, holding a glass of wine and talking. Zarya looked at him for a moment, then turned back to her conversation. She did not go over to him. She was not going to start drama at an event she organized. She stayed where she was and kept doing her job. What she didn't see was G1. G1 had arrived earlier and was moving around the room, talking to people and observing everything. He had seen Zarya when he walked in. Later, he passed close enough to Marcus and the operations team to hear their conversation. Marcus wasn't speaking loudly. He was speaking carefully. He mentioned Zarya and the Lumiere situation. He said he didn't know the full story, but he thought people should be aware since she was running the event. He said he just wanted to make sure people had the right context. G1's operations director looked uncomfortable. G1 didn't say anything. He finished the conversation he was in and continued moving around the room for the next 40 minutes. Near the end of the event, a small group gathered. Marcus was there, along with a few developers Zarya had invited. They were talking about CO Meridian and how the launch had been received so far. G1 joined the group. He spoke about the company's strategy and answered a couple of questions. Then he said, in a calm voice, "The positioning framework for this launch was built by our PR lead, Zarya Fontenakafer. The approach she developed is already getting attention from two of Hawthorne's main competitors. If you want to understand why this launch is getting attention, that's where you should look." He said it calmly and then excused himself and walked away. He did not look at Marcus when he said it. The group accepted what he said and moved on. One of the developers asked where Zarya was because he wanted to speak with her. Someone else said they had heard good things about her work. Marcus didn't say anything else. No one asked him for more information. The conversation moved on without him. Zarya was on the other side of the room when one of the developers came to find her. He introduced himself and said he had just spoken with G1 and wanted to hear more about the strategy. She continued the conversation without knowing what had happened earlier. She found out the next morning. G1's assistant mentioned it briefly during a post-event discussion. Zarya listened, nodded, and then asked about the follow-up emails that needed to be sent. She did not mention it to G1. But later that afternoon, when they were arguing about the next phase timeline and he was refusing to change something she knew needed to change, she realized something had shifted slightly in how she saw him. He had not defended her to be nice. He had done it because it was true and because it mattered for the business. She wasn't used to working with someone like that. She was used to people ignoring her work or taking credit for it. G1 had done neither, and that was going to change how they worked together whether she liked it or not. Episode 7. By the third week, Zarya and G1 had fallen into a routine. She would present a plan. He would point out the part he didn't agree with. She would explain why she thought he was wrong. Sometimes he changed his mind, sometimes he didn't. Then they moved forward and the work improved. It wasn't comfortable, but it worked. G1 was used to people being careful around him. His staff usually tried to predict what he wanted and adjust their ideas before presenting them. People didn't usually tell him directly that he was wrong. They found ways to guide him instead. Zarya did not do that. In their fourth week, they were in a planning meeting when she told him that his idea for the second phase of the launch was not going to work. "If you lead with a press release, journalists are going to ignore it," she said. "They already covered the company entering the market. That story is finished. You need a new angle." Looked at her. "What angle?" "You," she said. "Need a person, not a statement. A profile interview. Local business press first, then national later." "I don't do interviews," he said. "I know, that's why people will read it. was quiet for a moment. "I'll think about it. I need an answer this week," she said. "The timeline doesn't move." Gave her the answer the next day. He would do one interview, but he wanted approval over the final questions. She told him that was not how journalism worked. He told her that was how he worked. They argued for about 20 minutes and finally agreed on something in the middle. The interview was published 3 weeks later and became the most read business article in the city that month. He didn't tell her she was right. She didn't expect him to. By week 5, Ariam had started calling Zaria her person. She didn't say it directly to Zaria at first. She said it to other people. Her teachers, the household staff, G1's assistant. The assistant eventually mentioned it to G1 carefully, like she wasn't sure how he would react. G1 didn't say anything immediately. He waited. The situation came up in week 8. Zaria came to the CO Meridian office on a Saturday morning to prepare for a Monday presentation. G1 was also there, which was normal for him. Ariam was there too because her weekend sitter had canceled. She was sitting in a small meeting room with a tablet and a sandwich. When Zaria walked past the room, Ariam saw her through the glass. She ran out of the room and walked next to Zaria all the way to the main conference room. She climbed into a chair and then told G1's assistant, who was walking past, "My mom is working today too." About 30 seconds later, G1 appeared in the doorway. "Ariam," he said calmly. "We talked about this." "I know," Ariam said while opening Zaria's notebook and looking at the pages. "What did we say?" he asked. "That Zaria is not my mom," Ariam said. Then she looked up. "But she feels like my mom, so my mouth gets confused." Pressed her hand flat on the table and looked up at the ceiling for a moment. G1 looked at his daughter for a long time. "Close your mouth when it gets confused." "Try," Ariam said, turning another page of the notebook. She did not look like she was actually going to try very hard. G1 looked at Zaria. Zaria looked back at him like this situation had nothing to do with her job. He almost said something, then decided not to and walked away. After that, Ariam still said "Mom," but she said it more quietly. Technically, she had followed instructions. Across the city, Delancey Fontaine-Broussard was reading the news. CO Meridian's launch had been covered in 2 different business articles. Both articles mentioned the PR lead by name. One of them quoted Zaria directly. The other described the strategy she had built and used her full name. Delancey read both articles the morning they were published. For almost a year, she had believed Zaria's career was finished. That had been the plan. Not to ruin her loudly, just to remove her quietly. The termination would follow her and make it hard for her to get another serious job. It had worked for a while. Now Zaria was back, working on a major corporate launch, and her name was in the news again. That was not supposed to happen. Delancey didn't panic. She thought about it for a few days before doing anything. Then she started making calls to people she knew, people in business circles, people who might have information. She wasn't acting yet. She was just checking what she could still use. She wanted to finish what she had started. She had done it once and nobody traced it back to her. She believed she could do it again. She was wrong, but she didn't know that yet. Episode 8. The audit had nothing to do with Zaria. CO Meridian's legal team had found a small issue in their vendor credential system and hired an outside forensic IT consultant to review everything and make sure there were no security problems. The consultant's name was Patrick Ree. He had spent many years investigating how data moved through company systems. He was not looking for anything related to Lumiere, Hawthorne Industries, or Zaria. But on his 9th day of work, he noticed something familiar. A method used to access credentials and move files through an external contact before deleting the trail looked similar to something he had seen in a previous case. Not exactly the same, but similar enough that he went back and read his old case notes. Then he started looking into the Lumiere breach on his own time. He wasn't asked to do that. He did it because the pattern bothered him and he wanted to understand it. It took him 4 days. He looked at public records, company filings, and network connections he could legally access. Eventually, he found the beginning of a connection. He followed it. The connection led to a shell company. The company had been created 8 months before the Lumiere breach and closed about 6 weeks after. It had one contact listed, but the address and phone number were fake. However, the registration had been filed from an IP address. That same IP address had also been used to log into a business networking platform shortly before the breach. The account on that platform belonged to Delancey Fontaine Broussard. Patrick Ree wrote everything in a report, attached the documents, and gave it to CO Meridian's legal team on a Tuesday afternoon. G1 read the report that evening. He read it once quickly and then again more slowly. After that, he sat at his desk for a while without doing anything else. The next morning, he called Zarya and asked her to come to the office. He didn't explain why. She noticed his tone was different and didn't ask questions. She arrived at 10. He was sitting in the main conference room. The report was on the table. He did not email it to her or summarize it. He just put it in front of her and waited. She picked it up and read it. She read the entire report twice. The room was quiet the whole time. G1 didn't interrupt or speak. When she finished, she placed the report back on the table and looked at the wall for a moment. "I knew it," she said. "I know," he replied. They didn't say anything else for a while, then Zarya looked at him. "What happens now? That depends on what you want," he said. She thought for a moment. "I want everything documented properly, and I want the right people in the room when it's presented. Not a phone call, not an email, a room." He nodded. "I'll arrange it." She looked at him again. "Why did your consultant keep investigating? It wasn't his job." "I asked him," G1 said. "He said the pattern bothered him." Looked back at the report. "Okay." G1 arranged the meeting carefully. He contacted Hawthorne Industries' legal team and showed them the documentation. They responded immediately because they had lost a major deal because of the breach and wanted answers. He contacted Lumiere's managing partner. Then he thought about Diane. He knew enough about Zarya's family to understand that confronting Delancey privately was not enough. Diane had led that family meeting where Zarya was blamed. She had said harsh things in front of everyone and nobody defended Zarya, so G1 made 2 more calls. He invited 2 women who were important in Diane's social circle. He told them there was a business matter they should be aware of so they had accurate information. They agreed to attend. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning. Delancey did not know what the meeting was about when she was invited. She was only told it was related to a business matter connected to CO Meridian and that her presence was requested. She arrived wearing a gray blazer, her hair neat, her face calm. She was very good at walking into rooms confidently. She had no idea what was already waiting for her on that table, but she was about to find out in front of everyone whose opinion she cared about. Episode 9. Delancey walked into the conference room at 9:04 a.m. She looked around the table. She didn't flinch. That was what she did. She read the room and gave nothing away. Hawthorne's legal team was there. Lumiere's managing partner. 2 women she recognized immediately as her aunt's closest friends in Atlanta's business community. G1 sat at the far end of the table, and Zarya, she sat down. The lawyer G1 had hired started the meeting. He explained that the documents in front of them showed the Lumiere data breach attributed to Zarya had actually been done using credentials stolen by someone else. That person had been identified. The documentation was being shared with everyone at once. He slid a copy across the table to Delancey. She picked it up and scanned the first page. Her face didn't change. Page 2. "I don't know what this is supposed to prove," she said evenly. "An IP connected to a network profile isn't proof of anything. The shell company registration matches the same IP," the lawyer said. "The method used matches a known pattern. The timeline lines up perfectly with the breach window. That's circumstantial. Financial trail isn't circumstantial." He pointed to a page. "This is." Delancey looked. Her eyes flicked over the details. The room went quiet. She set the page down and folded her hands. "I'd like to speak to my lawyer before we continue." "You may," the lawyer said. "This meeting is just to show the information. You don't have to respond." She nodded, still calm, still straight-backed, still holding herself together. 4 minutes passed. Then the Hawthorne lawyer leaned forward. He asked one simple, direct question, nothing aggressive. He asked about the timeline of the shell company in relation to a dinner at Zarya's apartment that was mentioned in the documents. Delancey started to answer. Halfway through the sentence, she stopped. Because to finish, she would have to explain how she knew a detail she shouldn't have known unless she had been somewhere she had never publicly admitted being. She caught herself mid-sentence, but it was too late. Everyone at the table noticed. Her hands went flat on the table. Her composure didn't explode. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just stopped holding it together. The carefully curated Delancey, the blazer, the expression, the control went slack in one silent second. She looked like someone caught. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Diane wasn't in that room. Ji-won had made sure she was. The evening before, Diane had gone through the same documents at her dining room table, alone. No one to distract her. No one to shield her from the truth. There was nothing to say. Not legally, not personally. Every excuse, every defense collapsed in front of her. She had called her daughter disgusting, in front of witnesses, carefully, calmly, and she had been completely wrong. The apology was prepared by the lawyer, reviewed by both Hawthorne's team and Lumiere's managing partner. It covered everything: professional consequences, the termination, the lost contract, the reputational damage, and it included a personal statement from Diane and Delancey. At the Thursday meeting, after the documents were reviewed, the lawyer asked Zarya if she was ready to hear it. She said. Diane sat across from her daughter. She held the paper, read each word carefully without looking up. Her voice was flat, controlled. Beside her, Delancey's hands shook visibly. When Diane finished, there was silence. Everyone looked at Zarya. She had sat through the meeting the whole time, back straight, face steady. She looked at her mother, at her cousin, at the paper. Then she said, "Okay, not thank you, not I forgive you, not I told you so, just okay," because she didn't need anything from them anymore. Her healing had started months ago, in a parking lot in the rain, with a small, unexpected presence beside her. She picked up her bag, and this time she didn't leave alone. Episode 10, The Fallout hit Delancey fast. Atlanta isn't that big. People notice. Within 6 weeks, her business contacts went quiet. Meetings stopped being scheduled. Emails got shorter, then stopped entirely. Promised introductions never happened. She had built her reputation on trust, on discretion, on integrity. Once that appeared gone, everything collapsed. Diane felt it differently, but just as painfully. The two women at the meeting moved through Atlanta's circles quickly and decisively. They didn't gossip. They simply cut Diane out. Invitations stopped coming. Her committee positions disappeared without a word. Her name removed silently, precisely. Zarya didn't track any of it closely. She heard things here and there, but she had work. She had bigger things to focus on. 6 weeks later, Lumiere's managing partner called her. He said the termination had been reversed, expunged. He wanted her back. He admitted the firm had mishandled everything. He personally wanted to make it right. Zarya listened. Then she said she wasn't available. She had started her own firm in the months she'd been out. Small, 2 people, but strong. The Seal Meridian contract had been a proof point. 2 more clients had joined based on that alone. She didn't need Lumiere. She had already rebuilt what had been taken, and this time it was entirely hers. She thanked him and ended the call. Then she got back to work. It was a Tuesday evening in October. Ji-won drove. Ariam was in the backseat, tablet on her lap, eyes closed. She had been at an after-school program all day and immediately declared herself tired. Zarya sat in the passenger seat, reviewing a document from her assistant. They had been driving for 10 minutes, comfortable in silence, when Ji-won said, "I love you." Build up. No shift in tone, just those words. Zarya looked up from her phone. She glanced at him, calm, private, precise. The man who had quietly collected evidence and put it on a table without saying a word. Who had let a stranger sit next to her in a parking lot and watch her heart open. "I love you too," she said. From the back, Ariam's voice was awake. Finally, neither of them responded. "I've been waiting," Ariam said. "To sleep," Ji-won said. "I was asleep. You woke me up." "I didn't say anything." "You said enough." She settled back. Finally, she whispered and closed her eyes. It was a spring morning, soft sunlight spilling through the windows of the small chapel. 30 people were there. Just enough to feel intimate, but enough to witness the moment. Zarya hadn't wanted anything big, and Ji-won hadn't argued. She wore a simple ivory dress. No lace, no fuss, no one needed to help her adjust it, just the dress. Her hair pulled back simply, a few strands framing her face. She didn't wear a veil. She didn't need to. Ji-won stood at the end of the aisle, hands clasped in front of him. He didn't fidget. He didn't pace. He simply waited. His eyes found hers as she stepped forward, and for a moment everything else fell away. The room, the guests, even the day itself disappeared. Ariam walked beside Zarya. She hadn't been asked to play a formal role. She simply reached for Zarya's hand when it was time to move, and Zarya took it without thinking. They walked together perfectly in step. 4 steps from the front, Ariam looked up and whispered, "Pretty girls don't cry. Remember." Zarya smiled, feeling the weight of all that had happened, the parking lot in the rain, the fights, the betrayal, the silence. How far she had come from that place. She took a deep breath and kept moving. Jiwon's hand reached for hers as they stood at the altar. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His thumb brushed over hers, slow and steady. His eyes held hers in a way that made the room feel small and safe, and Zarya felt her chest expand. The officiant spoke, but Zarya barely heard the words. She only heard the quiet hum of her own heartbeat and the steady presence of Jiwon beside her. When it came time for the vows, Zarya's hands trembled just slightly. Not from fear, but from the sheer weight of love she had carried quietly for so long. She looked at him and spoke clearly, without hesitation. "I promise to stand with you no matter what. To celebrate you, to challenge you, to love you even when it's hard. I promise to build a life with you that's honest and real, always." Jiwon's voice was low, deliberate. "I promise to see you, to hear you, to protect you and let you grow. I promise to be your home and your adventure, and to love you without conditions every day." When they exchanged rings, the small circle of gold seemed to carry all the unspoken moments between them. Every struggle, every quiet victory, every laugh shared in private, it was all in that gesture. And then the kiss, not rushed, not theatrical. Just the two of them, lips meeting, holding, confirming everything they had promised and all they had endured. The kind of kiss that made the world outside dissolve. Ariam leaned against Zarya, watching quietly, a small smile on her face. As they turned to face their guests, hands still clasped, Zarya looked at Jiwon and whispered, "Finally." "Finally," he whispered back. They walked down the aisle together, not as separate people, not as two halves, but as a new whole. Ariam held Zarya's other hand, guiding her, steadying her, the perfect bridge between past and future, no tears, not a single one. Just laughter, smiles, and the quiet, unshakable certainty of love that had been fought for and won. If this story touched you, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which moment made you feel the most. I want to know which part stayed with you. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.